Hi, everybody. Will here with this week's interview chair. In the chair, we have Dr. Elliot Moore. Hi, everybody. Will here. And this week on the interview chair, we have none other than Dr. Elliot Moore, fellow Canadian, dual citizen, actually, and this year's sporting group judge at Westminster Kennel Club, actually 2022. Looking forward to seeing that. I've known Elliot a long time. He was born in Canada. He left for the States before I actually got to know him. I actually met you, Elliot, when you were already in the States. So.
Right, that's true. Yeah.
Came up and visited a few times and brought some dogs up and showed, and I saw you then as well. Mm-hmm. How are you, Elliot?
Can't complain. It's sort of been locked down here for a long time, and just started judging again a couple of months ago. Got on a plane the first time a few weeks ago. Things went well. Vaccine seems to be working, so can't complain.
Doing its job. So let's hope anyway. And are you excited about your New York assignment? Obviously,
certainly am. Yeah. On one hand, I'm excited. On the other hand, I got to figure out things to do the 4 days I'm there because I can't really go to the shows.
You walk around like we all do.
Yeah, exactly.
You've got to stay hidden.
Afraid so. Fortunately, I have family in the city, so I'll be preoccupied.
Maybe there'll be a hockey game, right? No.
Yeah. I hadn't even thought of that. True enough.
One year I went and saw the Rangers play. I think it was Pittsburgh before the show all started. It was fun. So
yeah. I remember one year I was arriving and we were unloading at the ramp, and it was during an international hockey tournament, and the American team got off. This goes back when we only played amateurs. It was an Olympic or an amateur event. And the Russian amateur team was, of course, the Red Army. Yeah. And you watched our kids getting off, and they were all like 140-pound scrawny kids. And you watched the Russian team get off, and you went, "This is not fair."
Not going to go well.
That's changed a long time ago, but it was really funny to see. Yeah.
Even when we saw them, like I remember in '72 when the teacher wheeled the TV into the classroom to watch. It was amazing watching those guys, even against our NHL guys. Our NHL guys almost looked fat and slow back then compared to them, but
yeah. I might have been at the Garden when you saw that Pittsburgh game, because I remember again after unloading, we took the elevator from the 5th floor, and I got in the elevator with Scott Hamilton, the figure skater, and Mario Lemieux. We're both in the elevator with me. Of course, Mario was 6'6", and Scott Hamilton is shorter than I am. But it's sort of interesting who you bump into at the Garden.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. Oh, well, let's get started. We could talk about hockey all night. But, how old were you, and how did you get started in this sport of dogs? So,
as you probably know, Will, I was born in Montreal, and
I know you tell me all the time with the Habs and whatnot.
That's great. Yeah, we'll skip hockey again. I was born in Montreal, and my parents were not doggy at all, but my uncle's wife bred Shelties, and she happened to co-breed a lot of Shelties with Hazel Slaughter back in the day.
Yeah.
I'd often go to the shows. Actually, the Montreal show, the United Kennel Club, was benched back in those days, and I'd help Hazel with her Shelties, and she had one big old Blue Dane. Audrey Benbow lived 2 blocks away from me in NDG. Then we had an obedience club, the Mountain City Obedience Club, right up the street, that I would go up and give them a hand once a week. At that time, I had to decide what I was going to do in terms of getting a dog. And I was a bit of a nerd as a kid, and I wrote notes and sort of narrowed it down to what breeds I wanted. Long story short, I ended up importing a golden retriever from England when I was 14 years old. And came from Sinsper Kennel, and that was Kay Graham White. She co-bred a lot of dogs with Joan Tudor Camrose. And so this was quite a nice dog. And he ended up being a Canadian champion UDT and an American UDT. Again, very different from what they were showing in the States at the time. No point in showing them in conformation down there. But that's back in the early 60s. At the same time, I got my first job when I was 14. You remember Pam Mack? She had a kennel out by the Dorval Airport. Maxon's Kennel bred some great corgis, co-bred Skies with Marjorie Adams. And again, all the stuff that as ex-handlers we don't get credit for when it comes time to apply for judging. I mean, every week we'd have to dinner people like Nigel and Bill. I got to know them very well. Again, Nigel's store over on DeCarry Boulevard was, again, walking distance for me. Ed Carver would come up from the States. Parker and Bev Harris, you remember them.
Yeah.
Horace Hollins, Carol's father was up showing English setters. They'd all come to Pam's place. We'd have dinner, and you just learned a lot hanging around as a kid. And certainly, I paid my dues. I was 14 years old. I think I was getting paid $4 a day, $1 of which it cost me to take the bus in and out of the city. And there was one old kennel maid that worked with me, and as I recall, I think it was the year of Expo 67, and we were full. We had about 140, 150 dogs there, and it was a lot of work for just the two of us. But it was a good start. Following year, I was 15. I worked for my local veterinarian. Then as soon as I got my driver's license, I headed south and started working for handlers. First handler was Martha Covington Thorne. I don't know if you remember her.
I remember her, Martha. Oh, yes. She used to show a lot up here. So
She did, actually. And one of the first dogs of note that she showed the time I was working for Trainer was that English setter bitch, Guys and Dolls Taste of Honey. And I remember that she was all of a sudden in the ring with that bitch. That was a beautiful bitch. And we ended up showing it, when I say we, Trainer. But again, that was when David Rummel had just bought the dog from Neil out on the coast, Guys and Dolls, and she was absolutely beautiful. Certainly, to this day, one of my favorite English setters.
Wow.
Worked for Martha Covington Thorne. From there, went down and worked for a gentleman by the name of Roy Stevens, who was a poodle handler, and.
How long were you with Martha? I'm sorry.
I was with Martha just for about 6 weeks. She needed help through the New England circuit. She needed somebody old enough to drive one of her Ford Econoline vans. That's how I learned to drive shift on this little old Ford Econoline, loaded to the gills with dogs, with I think one working brake, and it was a standard shift going through the mountains, the Green Mountains. But I survived, and one of the people working with me that summer was Eileen. Eileen
Hackett.
Eileen Hackett.
Yeah.
She wasn't old enough to drive yet. I think she was 15. So that's how far back we go. So then I went down to around Doylestown, Pennsylvania, and worked for Roy Stevens. The following summer, I believe that was the first time I worked for Bill Trainer, and Garrett was with Bill at that point. So there you go.
Yeah.
I'll bounce back to Montreal. I'll also mention that, again, when I was young up there, Luke Below was the up-and-coming handler. He bred whippets with Joan McKinnon, who also bred a lot of decent dandies, and of course Linda Berg through her. And this was before Malabar, before he went to the boxer kennel. Bill Scarpa. Again, I mean, everybody was up there. I remember there was a gal by the name of Norma Prescott, and her father, she bred Scotties. His name was Bert Collins. He was in his 80s when I was a kid, and he'd tell the stories. He was a terrier handler about taking the dogs on the train down to New York City, for the terrier show in Westminster and stuff like that. Andy Galt was showing Bo Billy D. It's funny. I remember some of these names, but these made impressions on me as a kid. So fast forward to my second year as a licensed driver, worked for Bill Trainer that summer. Garrett was there, great dog man, learned a lot from Garrett, miss him a lot. And then from there, I think the following summer I worked for Ted Young. Then I worked for Bob and Sue Fisher. Then I worked for Bob and Jane Forsyth 2 summers in a row. And then I ended up back with Bill Trainer.
Wow.
And this goes through, the end of high school and my college years as well. So when I ended up back with Bill Trainer, it was the year I graduated from McGill. I had majored in genetics at McGill. That was 75. And I worked for Bill for another year or two, and then went out on my own. So a lot of apprenticing, met a lot of good people. And again, the stuff we don't get credit for. When I'm working for Fisher's, it was like Grand Central Station with dog people going in. And I mean, Winnie and Edith Nash Hellerman were there about every week for lunch. Winnie Heckman, Edith Nash, Billy Kendrick and Vernell were always up. Norman Austin would come and stay with us. And there, maybe some lesser known ones that tremendous opportunity for me.
That's amazing.
Like I said, this is all the stuff when, handlers get a few more breeds and say a breeder does, and people get a little bent out of shape sometimes. When we were showing dogs, we were the first ones at the shows and the last ones to leave. And, you end up meeting a lot of people and learning a lot of stuff. So that was, that brings me up to when I started handling. And while I was working for Trainer, I met Linda, and we did this.
Was Linda working as well, or?
Linda was, she lived in Wellesley. And because she was breeding Shelties and some Keesies, and she was dabbling in Whippets, there were pretty strict dog laws in Wellesley. So she bought a little house in Oxford, Mass. So she was in Wellesley, Mass. In Oxford, Mass, where she could, have a kennel. And she had a gal staying there looking after her dogs. And of course, Trainer was in Oxford, Mass. So, we met each other, and then we ended up getting married, and we were in business for about 15 years, I believe. And then at that point, we split. She went back to law school. She graduated summa cum laude, I think, at Georgetown, and I ended up in Prince Edward Island at vet school, 89 through 93. When we quit handling, we both applied for our license, our judge's approval, I should say.
What year did you quit handling?
89, 90. My first year at vet school was 89.
Okay, yeah.
And she stayed on, showed another year or so. And, I'd come back and help her in the summer. And then in 90, we were both pretty much done. And in 93, I graduated from vet school, then did a year's internship. She chose to get the herding group. I got the sporting group. Of course, as we know, she went on and worked for the AKC and then started judging again, and has, since departed us. But that was that. I can't think of anything else. I mean, along the way, there, so many stories and good things that happened. I was certainly very lucky in terms of the point being, when I went on my own, any handler will tell you sometimes the toughest thing is you get pigeonholed with a certain breed or a certain group, and it's so hard to branch out. By virtue of the fact that not only had I worked for a lot of people with a lot of different breeds, particularly Forsyths, I met a lot of their clients. Mm-hmm. And, if you worked hard, it was noted. So when I did go on my own, a lot of people were willing, to take a chance and see how I did, which was nice. So we quickly accumulated a lot of different breeds and a lot of different groups, which is the toughest thing when you're starting out.
Yeah. As I remember, I was a sporting guy, so I basically remember you in Springers and Golden Retrievers up here. Whenever you brought dogs up, those are the breeds I noticed. So
Yeah, yeah. We certainly top heavy in Springers and Goldens. We showed, of course, we showed a lot of Shelties because Linda bred them. A lot of Shelties, Collies, Siberians, and a bunch of other breeds. But just those breeds alone could occupy you all day. You talk about handling conflicts. When you're showing Goldens, Shelties, Siberians, you get stuck in rings for long periods of time.
Well, I worked for Bobby Stebbins during that era when you were showing, and we had Goldens with Bobby and Linda, Goldens, and we were stuck in Goldens all day long.
Yeah, exactly.
Those things.
Exactly.
Off topic right now. What car are you getting ready now? You told me you're getting something painted soon.
We're still breaking up a little bit.
Okay.
And I'm on the better system. Today I was on, I don't know if you're familiar with the website Bring a Trailer, bidding on an old Saab wagon that I bowed out of the auction when it got a little too pricey for me, but I think the car still went for a fair price. So I get a few cars at auctions, and then local things or things we see come up. And it's mainly cars of my youth, British cars, a lot of Saabs, a few German cars, but I've got a little bit of everything. A lot of Jensens, which were quite popular in Canada. So those aren't that well known. MGs, Austin Healey's, Mercedes, Porsches, and about half a dozen Saabs, just because I like them. So they're a lot of fun.
What are the love topics? Sorry, okay, we're back to showing dogs.
Yeah, no problem. You asked.
I know. I like it. Okay, so carry on. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, when I started judging, so that was around 1990. They were still giving out complete groups, so I opted for sporting, and then of course I was up at vet school for 4 years in Prince Edward Island. And one of the sad parts was, because I was provisional, they called me up from a lot of the maritime clubs. Hey, can you judge for us? Which would have been great because I was there. I wouldn't have had to charge them a lot of travel. I wasn't allowed to because I was provisional, which sort of stank. But that's just the way it was. And I was provisional for a long time, because when you live in Prince Edward Island, it's pretty hard to get anywhere from there to judge when you're also trying to complete vet school. So it was a while before I took care of that. And then I went on and got the working group. And I've been judging over 30 years, and I've never had any ambition to be an all-breed judge. I like sticking to my two groups that I know pretty well. I had toyed with the idea of picking here and there, breeds we showed. We showed a lot of corgis and various other things. But the system down here just drives me crazy. So I've chosen not to. And it has its advantages in that if you just do two groups, if you do more than four groups, you get asked to do all kinds of shows that are kind of small with kind of not great quality entries, which I really don't want to do. So the fact that I just do two groups, I get asked by clubs that have a big enough entry that they can afford to hire judges that just do, two groups.
Course,
and it's actually worked out because I won't judge more than once a month. And of course, this past year has been crazy. Haven't judged more than once a year, but this has worked out for me. I don't love plane travel, and I have not trouble, but I get bored sometimes if they're smaller shows and the quality just isn't there. Judging isn't about groups and best in show. It's about wading through big breed entries and trying to figure out the best. That's where you determine a judge's worth, as far as I'm concerned. And if you're just picking from a couple of dogs here and there, it's not much fun.
Oh,
really.
I agree totally. The breed level is usually the toughest. In best in show level, how can you go wrong, really? And
exactly. Pretty hard to make a mistake.
Right.
Although I've seen it happen.
Well, over the years, who would you consider your main mentors as a dog person?
Yeah, good question. Well, obviously, I named all the people I worked for, and Obviously, they were all mentors. And I can say good things about all of them. When I was graduating from high school, I went to Bill Trainer and said, look, I got early acceptance at McGill, but I'm going to show dogs for a living. Would you take me on full time? And he and Betty, who was a veterinarian, sat me down and said, get your education. Best advice I ever got. Because fast forward, when I hit 35 and went back to vet school, my main reason was because a lot of my mentors and former employers, I'd watched them get to a certain age and their knees were going, their back were going, and they weren't enjoying it anymore. And I didn't want to go there. I didn't want to be that. So I felt it was time to change careers. And I wouldn't have been able to do what I did if I didn't have that undergrad degree. So that was probably the best advice I ever got. So I certainly give trainers credit for that. I give Teddy credit for probably being one of the best business people I ever worked for. Without going into detail, I mean, sure. He had a bunch of trainers, a bunch of Morgan horses. He really was a good businessman. He was also the master of intimidation when it came to showing dogs. If he had a dog that was of lesser quality that he needed a major on, he would hopefully go in and lose with the first dog and come out and have a little snit fit by the ring, just in earshot of the judge, and go in, win with a mediocre dog. He was pretty masterful at that. These are the things you remember. But in terms of probably the people I took the most from in terms of handling skills were Janie Forsyth, Richard Bauer, with probably Tommy Glassford coming in third.
Yeah.
I didn't work for Glassford. I didn't work for Bauer, but and again, being a setter guy, I don't know if you agree with me about Glassford, but I thought he was masterful.
Yeah, amazing.
And Richard was too. Richard could get the most out of the dogs, just keep them right on that edge when they were moving, but still have them under control without feet flying everywhere. He was an absolute master at that. And of course, he worked for Annie. And when I got into it, Annie had just stopped handling and was judging. So I never really got to watch Annie show dogs. And then Janie was amazing.
Yeah.
She could pull things together.
I know. I remember being on the Cherry Blossom circuit. I was just hanging around with George. I was too young to work. I was 10 or 11. And I was watching Janie show Powder Horns Yankee Rifleman, and George was showing Marquis at that time. Yeah. And it was just amazing what she could do. Amazing.
Yeah. And, you remember the things you pick up. And one of the things I learned from her, if you can't hide it, sell it. And it's true.
It's true.
You can sell just about anything. There's somebody that'll buy it in there. So pretty funny. Some of the things that she finished, nobody else could have finished. Especially boxers. And funny. Again, it was a different day. I remember she was showing her working group dog at the time was the doe bitch that D'Amico's owned. And she had this really pretty, I say pretty, she's sort of a doggy boxer bitch, but a really nice bitch, lovely clients. And I remember asking the clients one day, because I'd ask probably inappropriate questions, why do you have Janie as your handler when she never shows the bitch in the group? And the answer was, because if we hire anybody else, Janie will get a new special and we'll never win the breed.
And we'll never get in the group, right?
Exactly. That does not happen anymore.
Yeah.
They just had domination in certain breeds like that. It's unprecedented, and it's never happened before. It'll never happen again. And there were other handlers in other areas of the country that had that sort of dominance. We just don't see it today.
Right.
We see handlers with good dogs that do a lot of winning, but it's not the same dominance regardless of what dog they're showing. I'm not saying that was a good thing. I'm just saying that's the way it was back then.
No, I remember. We had that up here too. We had some handlers just couldn't be beaten. I remember when Gary and Elaine were together, it just seemed like they were unbeatable up in our area. So
for sure.
Yeah.
Boy, that goes back. And yeah, I stayed with them a couple of times when I was, up in the Mississauga area. But boy, oh boy, that's a long time ago. It's for me, it seems like a former life sometimes.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
And I didn't mention. When I was still in high school, my parents actually moved to New Jersey, and I stayed up to finish high school, and then CJEP had just started in Quebec, so started CJEP at McGill. And the people I stayed with my first year at McGill were Fran and Jeff Carrique. Now, I don't know if that rings a bell, but that was Carrymount Shih Tzus. Carrymount Chop Chop was one of the first Best in Show Shih Tzus. Wow. I stayed with them and basically worked for them for a year. And of course, I used to show Ann Snelling Springers, shows and whatnot. Yeah. Jimmy, again, in the interest of name dropping, these were, all the people that were, certainly powerful people in the day and good dog people.
Yeah, no question. Ann Snelling.
Yeah, yeah.
Dugan was one of my growing up. Dugan was one of my very favorite dogs. So
he was an exceptional dog. I'm sure you remember the picture of him on the dock soaking wet.
Yeah.
And here's a breed that you can do so much trimming to hide everything. There was nothing to hide on that dog. Nothing to hide. That dog was an amazing dog, but he's almost like a one-off for the breed. And I remember Bill said the problem with having a dog like Dugan is that now everybody wants you to show their Irish Water Spaniel, and so many of them are,
especially back then. Yeah.
But there were a lot of temperament issues in the breed. Yeah. I showed that Best in Show bitch. I don't know if you remember her, and won the Best in Show at Bucks County one year, and the next day at Trenton, I'm showing her in the group. And Henry Stucker's doing it. It was a very hot day. He sent me down and back, and I went down, and some lady opened the parasol at the end of the ring. The bitch hit the deck, and I had to drag her all the way back to Henry, and he was already examining the next dog. And just an example of what the breed could be like. I think Heidi was working for me at the time, and from then on, she sort of had to run around the ring making sure nobody opened umbrellas or parasols when I showed the dog.
Yeah, I had a dog that whenever she heard a forest dry in the background, her ears would start to flip, and that was my first sign that, all right, something's going on here. Same thing, I would send my assistant then was Yvonne. I'd send her off to find out who was forest drying a dog to stop forest drying.
Yeah. Oh yeah. We do you remember that Poppy bitch I showed? She was yeah. So she was afraid of loud noises. Maybe not a good trait for a gun dog, but anyway, she was. And we were at Staten Island, the Staten Island show one year, and that's held at an outdoors at this armory, and every day at 5:00 they shoot off a cannon. Well, the sporting group started just right around 5, and I think Bud McGivern, who lived on Staten Island, was doing the sporting group. He really liked her. We had a good shot. I was late for the sporting group because I had to stay like 100 yards away, cover her ears till the cannon went off, and then bring her in the group, or she would have hit the deck too. So, and again, she was very stable temperament. Yeah. I'm talking about loud gun noises. Yeah. This was loud, So yeah, funny stories that we all had.
Right, and people see all gun dogs now. That shouldn't happen. Well, you know what? That's not what they're meant to do. They're not supposed to show while this is happening. Yeah, so exactly. When they're hunting, it's an entirely different thing. So.
Exactly. And at least that's a breed that has somewhat stayed true to their form and function in terms of hunting. And a lot of breeders still do WCs, and I'm pretty pleased with Goldens in general in that respect. I mean, it could always be better. It's not maybe up to par of Brittany Spaniels. I did the Brittany National one year and gave the field dog the breed. Wow. You can't do that in many breeds.
No. So, do you remember Levine de Bruin? Kathy and Levine de Bruin?
It's funny. Not only do I remember him, I think I was 15 years old, a buddy of mine and I, before Trans-Canada Route 17 was from Montreal to Ottawa. It was just a 2-lane road. We did a bike trip because we had a friend that had moved to Ottawa. And again, 250 today, if a parent let a kid do that, they'd probably be put in jail.
Yeah.
We went up, just biking with 3-speed bikes up this Route 17, where every time we got passed by a truck would get blown off the road and fall over. And I could go on about that trip, but on the way back, we stayed at the Brunners because I knew them pretty well. Yeah, good people.
Well, the English setter I was talking about, the setter bitch, whenever he was always very keen on her. He gave her very first best in show, but he would see her have these reaction to loud noises. So one time he handed me his starter's pistol while I was in the ring. He wanted me to take her home and shoot over her.
Yeah,
so I have this in my pocket. The whole day I have this starter pistol.
That's funny. Yeah, they were good people.
Oh yeah, my God, they were so much fun.
Yeah. It's funny, the people I remember, and then, like I said, as soon as I graduated from McGill, I was in the States full time. So, I remember the people from, back that far, but that's pre-1975. And, there are fewer and fewer of them these days. So it's just the way it goes.
They still remember you.
Yeah.
Okay, we got off topic again. What was next? We talked about Janie. We talked about Tommy and Richard. And who else would you consider mentors of yours, even judging mentors?
Well, those were the handling mentors. Yeah. And I'm obviously, I worked for Bobby Fischer, and he was one of the best terrier handlers.
Oh, my God, yeah.
My point is that I didn't show terriers when I went on my own. Of course, Linda had the Cairn that won the group at the Garden, so we showed terriers. But certainly, I learned a lot about terriers from Bobby. I just never got a chance to really use it. Another funny story: when I worked for Trainer the second time, that's when Mike Dockel was there, and one of the people that came up from Puerto Rico for the summer, Marippy Wooldridge.
Oh yeah.
Marippy, this was probably her first trip to the States. So again, Marippy and I go back to when we were both just little kids working for Bill, basically. And she was as outspoken then as she is now, and I love her to death. So don't see enough of any of these people anymore. But there you go. Judging wise, good question. I think we all had our favorite judges. And you can speak more to this than I can, but when we were showing dogs, we had a handful of judges that if you had a really good dog in the kennel, you'd sort of wait to show it to them. You really wanted to know what they thought of it. You'd be really happy if they liked it. You'd be devastated if they didn't. I don't know if there are many judges like that today where people actually hold dogs out for them or, because, again, the part of the irony of this is if you're a really consistent judge, doesn't mean you get the best entries because there's a certain faction of people whose dogs you probably just aren't going to put up that much. If you're all over the place, sometimes your entries are a little better. I like to think I'm consistent. Judges that had the most effect on me were Mike Billings, who often had great words of advice for me. Funny story. I judged in Ohio, did short hairs, got some hate mail that week, which I haven't gotten hardly any of, but I remember going to Mike. I said, I got this sort of nasty gram after I judged short hairs in Ohio. I said, what should I do? She said, honey, start a file. Which is sort of funny. Annie, obviously. Lang Scarda. Another, I've told this to, in fact, I was talking to Janie Alston down in Greenville a couple of weeks ago, one of her first assignments. Kind of funny watching time march on. It was sort of Cliffy's first week as a rep and her first week as a judge, or one of her first weeks as a judge. And I passed along what Lang Scarda told me, and he basically pulled me aside. He said, you're judging now. He says, one thing I want to tell you, make your mistakes quickly. In other words, look decisive.
No matter
They're not going to get any better if you sit there and hum and haw. And boy, was he right. Because there are situations sometimes where you just want to point, but you want to make sure you got it right. They don't get any better the more you look at them. And very, very good advice from Lang. Certainly the other couple that it was always a pleasure to have dinner with them were Ed and Irene, because they did not see eye to eye on just about anything. Ed liked the prettier ones. Irene liked the more functional ones, particularly Dobes. Mm-hmm. And to listen to them argue about the day's judging was an education in itself. So I would say those were the primary people that I got the most from. I'm looking forward to seeing Ed in January. I know he's on the slate. Hope he's going to be there with the rest of us.
That'll be fun. I can't wait to see all you guys. What about advice? Let's start with handlers. What advice would you give someone that wanted to be a handler, a young person?
Yeah, I think the playing field's changed a lot since we were handlers. I mean, we did extensive apprenticeships, and we had to. I mean, in those days, we were still being licensed by the AKC, and oh, by the way, I got the last all-breed handler's license in 77 or 78 when I applied, because that was when they were giving them out piecemeal, one breed at a time, or this and that. And I had worked for enough people. I got my gazillion-page application, threw it in the trash, and wrote a one-page letter and said, "This is who I've worked for. I know what breeds I am. I know what breeds I can take money to show, but I know, more importantly, I know what breeds that I shouldn't take money to show." Mm-hmm. And I'm paraphrasing. It was more eloquently written, but Len Brumby was in charge in those days. Len Brumby went to shows every weekend on the East Coast. We had an unfair advantage because he knew us, but he knew me well enough, and the people I worked for. He said, "Okay, I'll breed ticket," which was kind of nice, really. Mm. Now, of course, that's all by the boards, right? My best advice is, enjoy it, keep it light, and try and learn from your peers, and don't take things personally. I see too many handlers in this day and age where, particularly down here, there are so many shows, the quality's become dilute just because of the number of shows. Right. People put a record on a dog that back when we were showing, they wouldn't be able to, because they'd be up against tough competition every weekend. They begin to believe their own propaganda. You need to know what you've got on the end of the lead and don't take it personally. I guess that's my main advice. I know some nights we'd go to dinner and, Linda might start complaining about some of the judging on the day. And I would say, hey, for every time you feel you've been beaten unjustly, there are times when you shouldn't have won and you won. We had a good day. We're eating at a good restaurant. We're going to get a good night's sleep. Be thankful. And that's always what we made a good living. For me, it was nice just to get there first thing in the morning, throw up the X pens, just sit there, have a coffee, and look at all the dogs we were showing in the X pens. And we carried night. It was just nice to see the quality we had, and enjoy it. I certainly missed it terribly when I quit. I knew it was the right thing to do, but I always liken showing dogs to, in a way, to being a professional athlete. Most athletes are done by the time they're in their 30s, and whatever they do after that, they're not going to get as big a thrill out of as being a professional athlete. You name the sport. And I felt it was the same way with handling. I did enjoy the time at vet school. That was like a second childhood. But once you got out and were working for a living, it took me a few years to adjust to a whole new way of making a living. And I've done very well. I've been very lucky. But I remember sitting down with one of my ex-Portuguese water dog clients, telling him, I wasn't thrilled about my new profession. And he said, and this guy was a very successful salesman. And he said, I was selling computers for 5 years until one morning I woke up and said to myself, you know what? You're a pretty good computer salesman. He didn't have to say anything more than that. You got to give it a chance sometimes and get comfortable with it. And, I certainly managed to buy a practice, and it's worked out very well for me. But part of it is don't sweat the small stuff. Pick your battles, and it's the same with handling too. It really is. Again, you can tell me, I don't know if there are handlers these days that are employing people so that people even have the opportunity to do the apprenticeships that you and I had. They seem to be
there's some. There's definitely some. I don't think they're staying as long as we all did. That's the thing.
Yeah. I mean, certainly people knew a lot of the people that worked for handlers in our day. The people that worked for Bob and Jane were pretty well known people.
Yeah.
Whereas today, it seems to have changed a little bit. But again, I'm not at shows every weekend, so I can't speak to that. But
no, I think you're right.
My advice. Enjoy it. Don't take it personally.
Now, your other hat. What about advice for a young judge?
Well, I gave you a couple of words of wisdom from
Lang,
from Mike and Lang, which I loved. Again, you should be learning constantly. We learned lots as handlers. I mean, if you're a good handler, you could walk in that class and you're evaluating your competition to know where you can beat them, where your dog's stronger, weaker, et cetera, et cetera. And that's often what makes us able to function as judges and get things done in a timely fashion, because we were doing this all our lives as handlers.
Right.
And I think sometimes it's the toughest thing. You probably know more than you think. You just can't overthink it when you get in the ring. And you really, really do have to have a really good procedure and protocol. It's so important. And again, I'm speaking, having judged mainly down here, where the classes can be pretty large and pretty intimidating if you're used to just having 3 or 4 dogs in the class. You need to have that. I've seen judges that I think are good judges get lost the first time they do, say, a golden specialty or something, and they're just overwhelmed. So be prepared. Be prepared. You better have a system to break it down into manageable sections, or you're going to be in deep water.
And then to go back to Lang's quote, I have almost the same quote. Thor Brown taught me, they don't get better, they just get older.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Absolutely. I can tell you, one of the first assignments I did was Greenwich, and it was, I think I had 4 or 5 open dogs and Irish setters. And Celeste had a dog that was probably 6 inches taller than everything else in there, but the best put together dog. And it was a hot day, and I dawdled, and that dog, of course, started to he had to go first or last. I put him first, but by the time I put him first, the heat had gotten to him. So, it didn't look, I should have just, the heck with it. I know he's big, but, and the words of Lang's words were echoing in my brain. Yeah, I didn't do that fast enough, Yeah, it's true.
It is true. And you watch
judging is a learning experience. Every time you go in there, you should be learning something. On some of the breeds that I wasn't that familiar with as a handler, there are 9 or 10 new working breeds since I showed dogs. I'm asking questions all the time. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I get satisfactory answers, and sometimes the breeders say, just do what you want, But, things that aren't addressed in the standard, is this a problem? Or but you got to ask. You got to ask somebody, or you'll never learn. And anybody that thinks they can just read a standard and they're going to be good at that breed is sadly delusional. Yeah. And I have heard judges that judge a lot of breeds, if not all rounders, saying, and I'm quoting this, as far as I'm concerned, type is soundness and soundness is type. Well, that's just not true. You should, if you're judging, know soundness, but sometimes you have to wrestle in certain breeds with trying to be consistent to type. In some breeds, it's absolutely impossible. You get in there and they're all over the place. But if you're not wrestling with it in your mind, maybe you should be taking a better look at what constitutes good type in this breed. There are certain breeds that are really difficult. For instance, in the sporting group, English Cockers, because the solids are so different from the broken patterns. It's a tough breed for a lot of people to judge. On the other hand, I think Goldens can be tough for a lot of people that haven't in the breed a lot, because the colors are so consistent that they find they have a harder time differentiating.
And then there is a variance. So we see, especially up here, we see a lot of English style Goldens.
Yeah.
And when you walk down there or drive down there, you look at a class, and it can be very foreign to us looking at those classes.
Yeah. It's tough. When I was a kid and I had this Sinspur dog, so his dad, I think, was Camrose. I don't know if it's Camrose Lucius, I think, was his father, and very English, very narrow from stem to stern, but very English type. And I don't know if you remember Sue Brickell. She was a golden breeder down here, and she was at the time showing this dog called Charade, which he had coat to the ground and was almost as dark as an Irish setter, but he was winning. And yet she was trying to introduce English bloodlines. She was one of the first people who bred to this dog. So it's funny, down here, even though that's what was being, and I mean, we're going back 50 years now, more than 50 years. They didn't discard the English dogs. They just, they had trouble incorporating them into their bloodlines. It didn't mesh. I watched Goldens, over at Windsor one year, and it was funny. We were over there. We were basically corgi shopping for one of our corgi clients, but I was playing hooky and watching Goldens. And funny, I was standing ringside and struck up a conversation with the steward. Turned out he was the judge's husband. They divided Goldens up into dogs and bitches because there were too many for one judge to do. So she was doing bitches, and he found out, he's from the States, and I was there, and he said, "Come on in the ring." Basically, we sat together at the judge's table. He popped open the cooler, handed me a beer, and we sat in the ring drinking beer, watching his wife judge. That's England for you.
Yeah, exactly.
But there were a lot of pretty Goldens in there. There weren't too many sound ones. And this goes back a long time.
Right.
The other thing I also noted was the week before I watched Goldens up at Leeds, up in the northern part of England. They were completely different from the ones down at Windsor. And people keep talking about a British type. It depended who was judging and what part of the country you were in. Because, some of them looked a lot more like ours and some of them looked like white Newfoundlands. It really varied from show to show, often depending who was judging, because often it was breeders that were judging, which I found interesting. It was an eye-opener. And it's another thing in terms of words of advice for judges. We're seeing so many of these new breeds that it's sort of nice to have in your mind's eye what constitutes a really good example. And we're not seeing them in some of these breeds. We don't know. I remember I had been judging. No, I'm sorry, I wasn't judging. I was still handling. But I didn't know what a good curly coat looked like till I went to this Windsor show, and there was a curly one in the group, and I looked at it and said, that's what they're supposed to look like. I'd never seen one in this country at that point in time. So, boy, oh boy, you need to get out there and look for some of these good ones. And if you can travel, so much the better, because you're not going to find them if you're just in a certain area.
In the backyard, yeah. Well, so when you first, I'm going to pick your brain a bit, when you first walk in the ring, what is the first thing that grabs you? Is there when you see a class of say a class of 10 dogs? What is the first thing that grabs you? What are you looking for?
Well, basically, I go down the line. I'm just sort of looking at balance and how they fit together. The usual, top lines and balance, too long, too short, blah, blah, blah. And then depending on the size of the class, I'll often get closer, go down the line and just look at heads. In breeds with good exhibitors, a lot can be hidden when they're standing. So that first go round, usually everything hangs out.
Yeah.
I tend to move dogs maybe more than some people do. It's not because I want to see them run around fast and their legs going 100 miles an hour. It's basically because all the things that handlers can hide stacked, they can't when the dog is running around or free baiting. And sometimes that's more what I'm looking for than even, where the legs are going. What's that neck into top line doing? What does it look like behind the withers? What's that croup look like? All the things that a good handler can push, pull, stretch. It hangs out.
Yep.
It hangs out. And it's funny because, again, sometimes you see some of these dogs with a pretty good record and the handler stacks them. They've got them all pulled out. And then when it's running around or free baiting, you see these rolls over their shoulders and stuff. And I know people are missing it because how you'd have to penalize that kind of thing in certain breeds, but just don't buy them stacked. Look at them moving.
Yeah,
not just
line standing and moving is important to me, and that's I get it.
Yeah, there's also to that when it comes to handling. I'm not talking professional handlers. I'm just talking about exhibitors.
Oh, exactly.
There is most people sort of get it what they need to do to stack. I'm not saying they all get it right, but they understand that. I find most people do not understand the optimum speed for the dog they have on the end of the lead. Sometimes down and back, they need to go a little slower. Sometimes around, they need to go a little slower because there's a speed past which the dog starts to fall apart. And I think most of them are just zipping around without even thinking. Have they ever had somebody else move the dog and see what it looks like at different speeds? That to me is a lost art. It always has been. I mean, this isn't new. This is something I've always said. I think that the best handlers know what speed to move their dogs at, and there are not that many of them.
Yeah, and those handlers have become judges. And like you walk into let me say, let's go back to Bob. If you ran a sheepdog around the ring, he was going to knock you senseless, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Or a bulldog and like, oh.
Yeah. You've got to understand that. And this gets into pet peeves as well. You really should have some grasp of the standard of the breed you're showing. Obviously, if you're judging, you should have a grasp of the standard. But, I get annoyed when I walk in a class of Goldens and they're all being stacked like setters. What happened to level top line? They didn't change the standard. And some of it are, good handlers. And some of the dogs, you can't help it. I mean, they're stacked like that because they can't do any better. But in a lot of cases, if they worked at it, they could at least get a level top line.
Yeah.
Know your breed.
Well, I think a lot of it comes from a certain dog will take off and win, and the handler will show it a certain way. So a bunch of them just emulate them and do the same.
Yeah.
With the wrong look.
I certainly think think you're right about that. But and again, having been in it this long, you are involved with sort of the maiden voyages of a lot of these new breeds that get recognized. For me, Shih Tzus were the first because I was showing them in Canada, but they weren't recognized in the States. So we showed some of the first Shih Tzus, soft-coated Wheatons, Portuguese water dogs, Bichon Frises. And those are perfect examples because a lot of those dogs, there's a lot of trimming involved. And the controversy in the beginning as to what constitutes a proper trim, everybody has their opinion. And to your point, it takes one big winner to sort of almost establish what the trim should be. And
It can go either way. It could be, make everybody, make everybody angry.
Yeah, exactly. But it takes a while for that balance to come in, because boy, oh boy, in the beginning, there's always a tendency in most of these breeds to leave way too much hair on all of them. And it takes a while. And that happened with all of them. Certainly Wheatons, Bichons, and Portuguese.
Oh, yeah.
We had clients from Long Island that when Portuguese were recognized down here, they came up with their 2 Portuguese. They were obedience judges, but they had Portuguese for a long time. They brought a stack of magazines from Portugal, Portuguese water dog magazines in Portuguese. So basically we could figure out how to trim them. We went through like a stack this big to figure out how to trim them. And they were recognized on January 1st. So we were all down in the Florida circuit. Bill finished Charlie Brown first, and then we finished the next 2. And funny story, later that year, Bill got his first best in show on Charlie Brown under Joan McKinnon. She was down doing Ballston Spa, and her comment was, it's the best Portuguese she had ever seen. It's the only Portuguese she had ever seen. I won't comment about the dog, but what the heck, it was good for the breed.
Exactly.
Just kind of funny.
Yeah.
That's
funny.
Yeah.
One last question for you, Elliot.
You bet.
If you could meet up with the 20-year-old Elliot now, what advice would you give him?
Boy, I look back on what I've done, and I look back on, how other people have fared in this profession. And most of my big decisions were gut decisions. You hope you're doing the right thing, and they were. I probably wouldn't have done anything differently. I'm being honest.
Yeah.
I really have no major regrets. But probably biggest personal regret is never having kids, but I was never in a position. You live like a gypsy when you're a handler, right?
Yeah.
Well, Linda had 3 kids from a previous marriage. She didn't want them. I didn't want them. Then you get out of vet school, give yourself sort of a window till you're 45 to maybe have kids. If you meet the right person, doesn't happen. So I don't, I regret not having them, but you don't have them just to have them. You have them when the time's right. See, I've been very lucky, really. I really have been. And I've made my own luck, but certainly I wouldn't change a thing. But I've worked pretty hard at it too.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Well, I appreciate your time. It's good talking to you, and I look forward to seeing you in New York.
I hope everybody can get down. Way things are going this week. Hopefully things. I look forward to getting back up to Canada. Again, Montreal's my hometown.
You can still come up.
Right now I can't,
still open.
I'm a dual. I could have come up anytime. But
true.
You sort of have to have a purpose. And usually my excuse is in June. I like to go to the Formula One race, and of course that's been canceled the last 2 years. So hopefully next year, we should get together and do that sometime.
Yeah, that'd be fun. Or a hockey game. We'll go watch the Habs and the Maple Leafs. For sure. The last time we could get in, I watched the last game of the year, and it was Habs Maple Leafs. Yeah.
That rookie whose name I'm going to forget scored a hat trick. It was a meaningless game, but it was still fun to be there with the crowd.
For sure. I remember there's no place like that. I'm a Leafs fan, but there's no other place to watch a game but in Montreal. It's so exciting. So exciting.
Blast. Yeah, the tickets cost more than the hotel rooms, but
same as in Toronto. But I went there. I forget. Maybe it was Ed Gravely that sent us there, but it was just so exciting. I forget even who they were playing, and the Habs weren't winning, but when they scored, it was like they just won the cup. It was amazing.
It's terrific. So yeah.
Anyway, you're off topic again. I appreciate your time, man. It's really good to talk to you. And again, congratulations on New York, and I can't wait to see you doing your job there. So looking forward to it. It was great talking to you as well, and stay healthy, and hopefully we'll all get together in the city. Yeah, exactly. You as well, Elliot.
Okay, well, take care.
Thanks, Elliot. If you like what we're doing here, make sure you press the like, share, and subscribe button. You want to get a hold of me, get a hold of me at dogshowtips@gmail.com. Or if you want to find out what's happening in Will's world, go to willalexander.net. And don't forget about the Dog Show Drive, found on your podcast providers every Thursday with myself and Wayne Cavanaugh. Stay safe, everybody.